Now, our final session of the conference is a conversation between Wells Fargo's Saul Gindi and Edward Jones's Ann Elliott. Saul and Ann will discuss the trends impacting the wealth and asset management industries, such as evolving client expectations, advisor growth, and the great wealth transfer. Saul is the head of Wells Fargo's advisors, where he leads the Wells Fargo's brokerage and wealth management channels, the independent business, as well as first clearing, ultimately leading over 12,000 advisors to deliver an exceptional experience to their clients. Now, prior to his role, Saul was the CFO of Wells Fargo's Wealth and Investment Management Division. And before joining Wells Fargo, Saul held various executive leaderships across other global financial institutions. He earned both his undergraduate degree and MBA from the NYU Stern School of Business. He's also dedicated to impacting the industry and his communities through a number of board memberships, including the United Negro College Fund, the Consumers Bankers Association, and SIFMA. Joined in conversation again will be Ann Elliott of Edward Jones, Senior Investment Advisory Consultant. Saul, Ann, very nice to have you with us. Looking forward to this conversation. Please take it away.
Thanks, Ed. And before you go, Ed, I'd like to have a little virtual round of applause. So Ed's been our master of ceremonies for our conference. You've heard him throughout the day, so you know he provides great bridges between sessions and has some very smooth NC skills. So thank you, Ed.
Appreciate it, Ann. Thanks very much. All right.
And Saul's a little bit of a music man himself, as you'll learn. So maybe we'll keep that for an in-person future conference. Rich can play his instruments. Saul, you can hit him with your musical notes and karaoke. So thank you, Saul. Appreciate you joining today.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm glad to be bringing up the rear of the entire event. So I heard it's been fantastic so far.
Thank you. Yeah, we have certainly had a great time. So what are we going to cover over the next 30 minutes? Well, we'll have a discussion on the wealth and asset management industry, as Ed shared, broaching topics like the value of advice and relationships, preparing for the great wealth transfer, and other important trends in our industry. And we have plenty of time for Q&A. So as you have thoughts, please pop those into the chat. We'll have time again, as I said at the end. But Saul and I would really like to make this conversational, so we welcome questions throughout as well. I'd encourage you to review Saul's professional bio on our conference main page. As you heard, he's the head of Wells Fargo Advisors, which encompasses over 12,000 financial advisors and over $2 trillion in client assets. We'd like to keep the intro a little bit personal, though. So I mentioned you were a karaoke fan. Saul, what's your go-to song?
Oh, wow. There's so many, but you know, I go back to high school in sort of the late 80s, early 90s. I have to go Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine.
Great choice. That really gets the energy up in the crowd. I'd encourage you all to check out a recent Barron's article on Saul. You can find that on his LinkedIn profile. It has more information on his career and kind of some insights at his time at Wells. So another question for you here.
Well, can I tell you one thing about karaoke and why people love doing it with me is once you hear me do it, anybody can sound good. So it's the great equalizer.
The great equalizer. I like that. I don't know if I'll put that to the test. I'm pretty bad, but I do enjoy it. And I think that's one thing that kind of brings the crowd together. So I like your point on it being the great equalizer, maybe building trust and relationships with people. So we know it's Sweet Child of Mine. What books are you reading, either personal or professional?
Oh, okay. Well, so I just finished an interesting one. I'm going to geek out a little bit. A book called The Engineer's Wife. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and it's a book about the building of the Brooklyn Bridge and how instrumental we all know about the engineers that built the bridge, but actually the engineer's wife was just as important in the building. So the backstory is fascinating.
Very cool. I'll have to check that out. The Engineer's Wife. All right. So we have spent, as you mentioned, this is the last session, the last day and a half covering topics like crypto, ESG, market updates, community impact, and more. If you could sum up all of what we're seeking to deliver to clients in our industry, what would you say about wealth management? What would you say that means to you?
Yeah. So I would, just listening to that, I know that's very technical. But when I think about wealth management, I bring it down back to people, right? At the end of the day, I really feel it's a people relationship. We're a people business. And fundamentally, it's about trust and being able to like work with people that you trust and be able to eventually get what you want out of life through that relationship. And everything else you mentioned before maybe are like ways to help get there, but I don't think that's the core of what wealth management is.
I love that. It's not about, the money. The money is what drives the engine for the client, the what's important to them. We heard that throughout several sessions yesterday, and glad to hear you kind of reiterate that today. You're coming up on a year in the role. What have you learned as your time as head of Wells Fargo Advisors?
Oh my gosh, that's a good. So the first thing I learned is you never stop learning, right? We're always thrust into new roles. You're always meeting new people, and you have to listen because when you listen, you learn a lot of new things. And I'll tell you, you mentioned our business is big and sprawling. We're in all 50 states. We have hundreds and hundreds of branches, thousands of advisors, and every one of them it runs their business slightly differently, and every one of them thinks they're really special. So the biggest learning I have is you have to see it. Right. You can't sit somewhere and assume you're going to be able to have your fingers on a hand, or your hand on the pulse of a business that big and that diverse without getting out there and being in the trenches and seeing what's happening every single day in every city, in every market, in every branch where we have relationships going on. And because of that, I actually spent a lot of my time traveling, more than I had thought when I was appointed in this role a year ago. I'm actually, sorry I couldn't be in St. Louis. I'm there next week. I happen to be in Charlotte, North Carolina today.
And you were in New York earlier this week when we connected too. So you're globetrotting.
I was in New York earlier this week, but if you're wondering what the skyline is, that's what it is behind me. The Queen City.
Very pretty. And I think that's good advice. So be a student of the industry, whether that's advice for those of us in our professional careers or those students that are on the line with us today. And here's kind of another kind of advice type question for you. You're at JP Morgan for over 20 years. Switching firms, I can imagine would be intimidating. What advice would you share for our participants today who are either considering a new role within their firm or outside of their organization?
Yeah. So listen, I would say the first thing is you have to set yourself up for success, right? Anytime you're thinking about doing something new, like, for the students here, whether it's, the decision you made from high school to college or from college to graduate school or choosing your first job. And the number one thing, and you're going to sense sort of this theme from some of my answers. I have the same approach to work as I do to what you asked me about wealth management. It's also about people, right? The biggest factor in, I think, your success at work is liking the people you work with, trusting the people you work with, and having, particularly at the beginning parts of your career, having really good bosses that go out of their way to help mentor you and to help really look out for your success and view it as part of their job to help you do that. And I think I'm sure in common, if you ask me, I could point to a few that I've had. If you ask probably everybody who was on a panel the last couple of days, they'd probably point to that as one of their great success factors. So I would say that I'd give that advice. Think about the people as much as where you're going and the industry you're going in, because that's going to make a big difference in your happiness and your success.
I love that. We spend a lot of time at work, a lot of time away from our families. It's important that we like and trust the people that we work with, but are also people ourselves that are trustworthy and likable, and I think will lend to future success within the industry.
And you always build upon like your relationship. So I'm lucky here. When I came to Wells Fargo, I happened to know a few people from my prior life that were already here. So it wasn't like all the relationships were new. But I've met such wonderful people over the last. I've been here almost 3 years now. So it's now sort of a little bit of the new, a little bit of the old. Mix it all together. You have a new experience, a new strategy, and that's sort of what makes life exciting.
Great. So we've covered a little bit about you personally. Let's transition to the industry questions. So when it comes to the value of advice and relationships, and this is actually probably a great transition from your previous point there, what is it that clients are looking for from their financial team?
Yeah. So, I'll look. Let me look at the last couple of months, and I'll tell you. We know we've had a lot of volatility in the markets, right? Every Monday morning we come in and there's something new. We had some banks fail. We had some, a bank in Europe fail. We've had, some volatility for a couple of weeks. We had another takeover this week. And I think the thing that clients really expect most, and the ones that say they really have great financial advisors, are when financial advisors are proactive. Like, can't be afraid to reach out, even if things aren't going great in the market, even if things aren't going great in the portfolio. No client wants to have to call you and ask you something that's on their mind. You need to be able to anticipate and, be able to know that you're the one who's trusted to be the one to make the outreach, right? The one to say, hey, here's what's going on. I don't know if you're thinking about this, but let me sort of give you the update and, see what the client says and then take that and work with that. I think particularly what I see, and we've all had this, like when we started out in our career, and I've seen it particularly from, newer financial advisors, is you get comfortable with a few of your clients, but there's a little bit of intimidation to make that call if you don't have good news to report. And you can't have that, right? You got to be able to be impartial. You got to be able to be there to provide great information. And then the advice will come from that. The relationship will come from that. But I would say like that's a good piece of advice first. And then obviously the next thing is you have to be an expert. Like, part of the reason, we may be afraid to make the call is maybe we don't know as much as we'd like to. And that's the other thing. You need to constantly, back to the sort of, you always learn, you need to constantly be learning. If you're not an expert when you make the call, then the call's not gonna be that productive either. So you got to work on both those things.
So I'm hearing you saying being proactive with your clients, anticipating their needs to help build that trust with them, and be an expert in the industry. That focus on continuously learning, like all of you are doing here today by taking time to join this conference and this session. When it comes,
and you can't be an expert at everything, but the best know how to connect people to the expert if you can, and be that person that can do that, which is just as important too.
Yeah, we've heard that come up a few times on that trend on teaming. Any thoughts on teaming and how you can really rely on a broader group of individuals to support the clients and their goals and planning?
Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, whether it's, financial advice or sports or, many of us, in our schools, whether we're college students or MBA students, you get more done as a team than you can as an individual, because it's just common sense, right? No one person can be expert at everything, but if you take a bunch of people who are each expert in one area, then when you put them together, you have more power, and you're able to deliver more. You're able to cover more of the waterfront. You're able to really, I think, switch that relationship up a notch.
Yeah. One book that is on my list to read is called Life-Centered Financial Planning. And one of the key messages there is that the role of the advisor is to also be an expert in the client and get to know what's important to them, what drives their decision-making, who else is in their network. How do you recommend advisors, as well as those of us like myself who are in the back office on the FA's team, get to know more about the client?
Yeah, listen, it's just more at bats at the end of the day. More at bats gets you more comfortable. More good quality interactions with the clients will open up, right? It's not all about you saying, bringing all the information to them. You just have to give them an opportunity for them to say what's important to them, and then you could help them figure out how to deal with that. But at the end of the day, life takes time, expertise takes time, training takes time. Nothing comes in the snap of fingers. And that's why I think going back to teaming, that's why that's important too, right? Teaming not only provides a client with different expertise, but it also provides us in the industry with the ability to learn from different people, the ability to be able to rely on others, and to be able to really develop yourself in a way that you're not on your own, and the way that's natural. And I think, that you take that and then you say, okay, that solves issues on both ends. And then you look at what's going on in the industry in terms of where the industry's headed, like, more technology, definitely more focus on different types of clients. You definitely need teams to be able to deal with those trends as well.
Well, along that vein of technology, we hear more and more about artificial intelligence or AI in wealth management. How is that being used today, and what can it not replace?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll tell you sort of how we're using it now and where I think it's headed, like what's real and what's experimental. So, the real part of it right now, it makes client experience and client service a whole lot better. When you could use AI to put all the data about a client together, or be able to for a client to be able to interact, rather than you used to have to like press buttons if you needed an answer 1, 2, 3. Now you could talk to it, and those are real powerful data and models behind providing really good information with those wizards that help you. And I think that's really good for clients because it saves them a lot of time and it gives them really, really good, accurate information. And that's simple, and everybody does that. The next level is I think how we use data and information to make us better and to make us smarter. One of the biggest complaints I hear from my financial advisors when I visit them is they'd like to have more information at their fingertips about their clients or about opportunities for their clients, or that put pieces of the puzzle together between the offering we have and the needs that the client has. And, I think if we can do that for them in a way that, makes them more effective, gives them more time to spend with clients and less of their time having to prepare to spend time with clients, I think that's a really, really good use for artificial intelligence. Now, both those don't sound sexy, Ann, but I'll tell you where you were headed is you're asking me if eventually ChatGPT or something like that's going to replace an advisor or an advisor relationship. So yeah, I'm going to tell you, I don't know the answer to that question, but it's going to be very hard to do that if that's what some of these companies are out to do, because you could replace some of the decision making, and you could have these data models that extrapolate what you would do next, but you can't replace that personal relationship. Mm-hmm. And if you start with the foundation of, at the end of the day, wealth management's about trust, and you could get good products from a variety of people, then it has to be about the trust. And I don't know if I'm going to trust ChatGPT more than I'm going to trust Annie Elliott, who I've known for a long time, and who has a personal relationship with.
Yeah, and I know that we think about previous conferences. We're talking a whole lot less today, and really not at all do I think the word robo advisor has come up at this conference. And I think, Saul, to your earlier point about volatility in the market and this idea that you can't replace the person on the other side of the line, the person who knows you and knows what's important to you and to your family.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, like one of the things I that I talk about a lot, here at work, is a couple of simple words. There's a word called "or" that we typically in our life, we tend to think of the world and the options we have as black and white. So we tend to say, okay, are you going to work with a financial advisor, or are you going to work with AI or a robo? Are you going to meet your advisor in person, or are you going to interact with them only on your phone and your computer? And that's not the way the world works, right? The world is not an or world. And we could think about this in our personal lives. The world is an and world, right? We typically do both those things, right? We change our behavior, but we don't exclusively say, I'm never going to do one or the other again. So I'll go back to this, and I bring this from my past. I have a lot of experience in the wealth management business, but I also have a lot of experience in the consumer banking business, where I spent a chunk of my time when I was at JP Morgan. I was the chief operating officer at Chase. And we get the question all the time, similar to what you're asking me now, is like, when is AI going to replace an advisor? Well, we always got the question, when is your banking app going to replace your banking branch? Why do you need to have all these physical locations to do banking? And there was a time where everybody in the industry, all analysts, thought that every bank had to close their branches in order to be more efficient. And where we sit here today, that was about 10 or 15 years ago, the banks that did that and the banks that went too far there actually made a huge mistake. Because I think what happened over that time is we learned about that end. We learned that our most engaged customers are the ones that are digital and use that for their day-to-day transactional needs and still have a relationship with us. And when something important is happening in their life, when there's a moment of truth, an inflection point, they're having a baby, they're getting married, things like that, they still want to talk to somebody and they still want to go somewhere to talk to them. So having that place and having those advisors where you could do that became the differentiator and becomes the differentiator for how you take that relationship up to the next level. So, that's my belief here. Like, I think we've got a couple of decades at least where we're going to be working with the and we'll see what happens after that. But, a couple of decades is a hell of a long time. A lot can happen. And I think during that time, we have to embrace both.
Yeah, that and word is something that I'm going to bring forward in my own career. And I think about that even personally. So last night, I sent my financial advisor a secure message around 1:30 in the morning when I was thinking about needing to transfer money between accounts. She's actually on today. Love working with her. The ability to sign a form online whenever it works for me doesn't replace the fact that I still want someone to talk to when my husband and I have to make decisions about how and when we're going to spend or save. So that's a very timely example for me. Some other things I heard you say is we're leveraging, again, technology to support the client experience, not replace it, leveraging data to make us smarter. And one thing that really resonated with me, because I spend a lot of time helping advisors prepare for their strategy reviews with clients, is more time to spend with the client versus more time spent preparing to meet with them. So I think that's a great way to explain how we can leverage insight and data to inform the personal side of the business. Great examples there. We talk about clients and building trust. We all know how difficult and time intensive it can be to onboard a client. Once they decide to work with an advisor, it's important to ensure that that relation is strong with the FA, but also with their family. And one thing our FA guest Veronica mentioned yesterday, I called it the great wealth transfer. She called it the mega wealth transfer during her panel session. So what advice do you have, Saul, as our advisors are looking down this mega wealth transfer with their clients and through multiple generations?
Yeah. So if you all, when it got into it yesterday, the numbers are mind-boggling. Like, depending on the studies you read, there are tens of trillions of dollars over the next 10, 15, 20 years are going to change hands. And one thing that scares advisors, I don't know, I hear it a lot, that you must have gotten into yesterday, is the vast majority of clients after that wealth transfer will look at potentially changing their advisor. It's one of the first things they do. Like, you have the power, like you want to make sure you're comfortable with someone. So I don't think it's rocket science, and I think if you're a good advisor to a client, you have to, if the client is thinking long term, you have to be planning with them long term. So make sure you have that plan and you work on that plan with the client. Make sure that plan involves their next generations. One thing that I encounter a lot is, and it's amazing when you think about it, clients don't like or are uncomfortable many times speaking about money or speaking about what happens next with their own families, right? And sometimes they need somebody to facilitate that conversation. So that's another place where don't be shy, don't be bashful. The client may not ask for it, but the client wants it and needs it. And then when you do that, you have to think about some of the themes that we spoke about in your past few questions. Like, if you can't connect with the next generation, then you need somebody on your team that can, right? Otherwise, you're not going to have a chance. It's another reason, to work with teaming. If you can't connect with the next generation, not because of age, but because of diversity, right? Many times the next generation is a woman, and you have to understand how that's going to impact the relationship and the planning, and how that's going to work going forward. And how do you organize your practice and your team to be able to be successful with that? So just think about that. And there are no secrets, and it's just literally common sense. And advisors know when they don't have traction or when they're missing something, and they got to help themselves put the team on the field to be able to win.
When we were preparing for this, Saul, you mentioned a data point that was shocking to me, that about a third of financial advisors have a documented plan with their client. And to me, that speaks to a huge opportunity to develop relationships with clients where maybe some competitors haven't. What thoughts do you have on that point?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we know is that having a plan that you review on a regular, consistent basis with a client keeps the client grounded and makes the relationship much stronger. And then everybody who looks at this, every firm will do their analysis and say, okay, those clients stay longer, those clients perform better, those clients are not making knee-jerk reactions to short-term market events. Those clients are growing their relationships and consolidating their relationships because they want it to be part of their plan. And too many of us are still focused on a transaction instead of a relationship. And a plan is a very, very effective way to keep you grounded, remind you all the time that it is about the relationship. It's not about a particular transaction on a particular day, because if you have that relationship, then you're having conversations that are actually the most valuable to the client, which is eventually the wealth management solution for them for the long term. And yeah, it shocks me too when I see that number, right? Not enough of us are thinking that way. It's easy to lose focus when you get into the sort of the trenches every day, and you got the screen up on the wall, and you see the reds and the greens, and the world's moving fast. But you got to take a step back, and you got to say, what's the ultimate goal here, right? The ultimate goal is not to get through the day, but the ultimate goal is for the client, to really manage multi-generations and their lifetime.
Right. And absent that not happening, it creates some real risk for that family. So important from the business perspective, but also doing the right thing by our clients. And, Penny gave a session this morning on what's good for society is good for business. I see a lot of overlap there on the client level between your points. If we think about it again from the DEI perspective, I think there's a good discussion here. What is the case for DEI, and how do we ensure that we're all supporting that?
Yeah, well, listen, I'll get very, very practical. I mean, you gave a stat on the case for DEI. Is wealth transfer is a case for DEI, because most of the wealth are going to clients that are going to look different from the client base now. Not just women, right? We did a symposium for Latinos and Latino financial advisors at our firm, and some of the numbers there are staggering, right? 19% of the population, 50% of the population growth over the next couple of decades. If you took just that population, like Latinos in the United States, it's the 5th largest economy in the world. Like US Latinos are bigger than the United Kingdom or France. And yet we still sort of think of them as, make the case for DEI. You can't make a case for it. You can't be in business without considering that, these are huge client bases, and these are huge client bases that are going to demand advice, and we have to be there to provide it for them.
Great examples there. When we think about advisors building and scaling their practice, how should they be doing that specifically to attract high net worth investors?
Right. So the high net worth is a little different. And what I'm going to say here is, again, back to you can't be good at everything, right? But you have to be good at something. And I think I see, particularly with really wealthy clients or high net worth clients, the relationship's really important, but they want you or your firm, they want to look to you as an expert in something. You're not going to be an expert in everything. So you need to think about, where do you want to target? Where do you want to focus there? And you see different in our world. I'll tell you, there are advisor practices who choose to do that in different ways. There are some practices who say, I'm going to focus on really being an expert in trusts and in wealth transfer. And they use that as the angle to how they're gonna create new relationships with high net worth. There are others that say, I'm gonna be the expert on concentrated stock positions, and then they focus on executives of growth companies and taking those relationships further. Those are just good examples of creating a niche for yourself and becoming an expert in that niche. And that's how you get known and referrals from one client to another. So I think at high net worth, you need a little bit of that. It's not just you can't just be a generalist. There has to be, some angle that they will want to talk to you about. They need to call Annie for something. You got to be known for that thing, and then you'll be able to develop a relationship and build a business there.
I'm glad you said the word niche. That's exactly what was coming to my mind as you were speaking through that example. It's pick a place to be an expert. Don't try to be an expert in everything, but find something that aligns well to you, your level of expertise, training, and your area of interest too. Because I think we're all more excited and more engaged when we found an area that we generally enjoy working in on a day-to-day basis. Right. So another question from me for you, and this is more for those of us who are working in the back offices, how do we think about recruiting and retaining financial advisors?
Yeah. So let me start with the retaining, because I always say that's the most important. You want your best people to stay with you for a long time and be able to grow their business. And there again, it's common sense, right? They want to work someplace that's investing in the business, where we're constantly delivering the tools to be able to do your business easier and for your clients to do business easier. And for that, you need scale. Let's just, talk about the reality of it. Is technology is expensive and it's hard to keep up. And if you are going to be cutting edge and, provide the place where an advisor feels they can grow, then it's important to have scale there. And then the next thing I would say is you got to be able to take that and then align interests. So important. So I don't worry first and foremost about when I think about sort of my business or my business plan, how I'm going to grow revenues, right? That's secondary. That'll happen. What I worry about is, how are advisors that work here going to grow their business? Am I giving them the tools? Am I giving them the training? Am I giving them the capabilities to constantly grow their business? That's the way they think about it. And if that happens, then overall, the collectivity of 10 or 12 or 15,000 advisors is going to grow. But I always put the advisor first. They're my clients, and my advisors put their clients first, right? Because that's how eventually they're going to have long-term relationships that grow.
That's great perspective. And I would also invite those attendees who are on the line with us today. We have over 200 on with us. Send us your thoughts and questions. You've got Saul in the room with you. It's a unique opportunity to hear directly from him what's on your mind. And while we wait for some of those questions to pop into the chat, another that I had in mind for you is, as you think about your professional and personal accomplishments, what are some that you're most proud of?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'll give you a couple. I'll start really early, because I think, people will relate on the phone if there are a lot of students on to relate to this. Is, I started out going to college and working at the same time, right? So I was lucky enough to get a summer internship at a bank. The name of the bank was Republic National Bank in New York. It was a little private bank. It eventually got purchased by HSBC. And I was only expecting to work there for a summer, but, the way things go, like, some people left and I was asked to stay on. So I'm proud that I was able to go get through school, work at the same time, build experience. and graduate with a little bit of experience and a whole lot less debt, which was really, I think, a big benefit. And then the second I would say is, and here's the other thing that I think will be encountered with. Most of us will work at, a couple, at least 2 or 3 different companies, or have 2 or 3 different jobs throughout our career. And I think the most important thing really to have, and one thing that I'm proud of, is you take your relationships with you, right? You may go from one company to another, but the true mark of were you able to make an impact is, do you still have relationships with the people that you worked with 2 companies ago, or a company ago, or those clients? And if you're able to do that, it really validates that you were able to build a brand for yourself. And I always use, there's a favorite quote that I have, and it's about, sort of reminds me how to behave when I meet people for the first time. It's, people are not going to remember what you said. People are not going to remember what you did per se, but people are always going to remember how you made them feel, right? So be present when you meet someone for the first time. Be empathetic. Make people feel like they're the most important thing that's in your world when you're talking to them. And if that's the case, that's going to be a good foundation for them to pay attention to you.
Saul, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I certainly see that coming through in how you treat people. And that I had an event in Colorado, and one of my friends from PIMCO was there and said, "Oh, you're doing that session with Saul. He's just such a great guy. He took time. He went out with the advisors. He did karaoke. He just made everyone feel important." So just sharing that feedback with you, because they're words that you say you live by, but that's also coming through to the people that get to be around you. We do
saying that. Thank you.
We do have some questions coming through the chat here. So one of our attendees asked, what do you think will be the biggest change in the role of the advisor, thinking 5 and 10 years out?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to what stuff we already spoke about. I think 5 and 10 years out, it's going to be how the advisor is going to blend the digital world and stay relevant as an advisor. And the most important thing is, advisors can't fight technology, right? Remember, technology is not your enemy. Technology is your friend. How are you going to use it to make you more productive? And I think that's the most important question most advisors should be asking themselves and answering.
Yeah. Thinking about it in an and world, to use your advice from earlier. So another question in here from your firm's research. So at Wells Fargo Advisors, what do high net worth clients want most?
Yeah, so what they want most is they want to know that they have a complete relationship with their firm. And I'll give you some stats on this also. Like, you could tell I was a former chief financial officer. Most clients have complex relationships across many parts of their financial world. So they're not just doing investing, right? They're borrowing money. They're creating a plan. They have day-to-day transactions they need to take care of. And one of the things that clients love is if you could make all of that more simple for them. And we all have that there. And many of our firms have all those different areas, but what we don't do enough of is we don't connect the dots for our clients. And I think we'll find if we do connect the dots for our clients, then they're going to like us more and they're going to win more. Now here's the stat to remember. Most clients have multiple relationships with banks or other, financial firms, but there's only going to be one who they view as their go-to, one that's going to be their primary advisory relationship. And that one gets the majority of the business, like 75% of their business. Others may have like an account here or there, but it's playing for the leftovers. So if you're not connecting the dots, you have no chance to be that number one relationship. So I think that's a very important thing also to think about. It's not just about investments.
So to be the quarterback of your client's full financial picture, so that you're getting the 75% and not the 25% or what's left over after that point.
Absolutely.
Right. And where do you see the advantages and disadvantages as they present themselves today and across different advisor relationships? So this question is looking specifically as a comparison between broker-dealer, independent, wirehouse, those separate channels.
Yeah. Again, I don't think it's an or. I think different advisors like to run their business different ways. So, you know, I mean, there's a lot in the news about independence and, you know, advisors running their own business. You know, it's great. But remember, that's for advisors that really are going to spend most of their time with clients, but they also have to be running a business. So they have to go out and negotiate a lease, and they have to go out and make sure they have health insurance, and they have to go out and recruit, all the people that, there's no HR department. They're the HR department. So it's a different mindset. And many are extremely successful in that model, but it's not for everybody. And then there are others who actually like to spend all of their time with clients and just want to work at a firm where they'll take care of all that other stuff for them. And they find that they'll be able to grow their business best that way. And I think that, there are many advisors who work that way and are going to continue to work that way. That's not going away, right? And there's no best, right? It depends. Like, at the end of the day, I always say this to my advisor, that it's true in my own life. It doesn't matter what percentage you get paid if the pie's not getting bigger. Like a bigger pie is the most important thing at the end of the day. And you have to figure out how to do that. How do you grow more clients? How do you grow your client relationships? How do you become that primary advisor? So find the model that lets you do that best. I mean, there are other models too. We have a model for advisors that want to work. We have almost 5,000 bank branches, and we have advisors in those bank branches who are partnering with bank employees. That's another model. All those are great models. All those work if the advisor's comfortable and the client's comfortable. And there's no one that's the best, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a no one size fits all approach and different trade-offs based on what the advisor is looking for.
Yes.
So this next question, the participant is asking, how should advisors differentiate themselves? And they said, it seems we're all reading from the same playbook now. And when I hear that, my mind goes directly to only a third of advisors having a documented plan. To me, that presents an opportunity to be the advisor that's running full steam ahead into that space to deliver value in that way to clients. But Saul, what are your thoughts? How would you answer that?
No, I think absolutely. And we'll go back to two things we mentioned already. One is you differentiate. Remember, if the relationship is about people and about you could differentiate yourself with service. And you could differentiate yourself by being the one who reaches out and being sort of, the ear, the trusted advisor. And then back to connecting the dots, their entire financial life. If you could be that person, that's another way to differentiate yourself.
That's one thing that we're certainly seeking to help our advisors understand at Edward Jones, is that by and large products are mostly commoditized, as well as access to them at this point. So when we think about what is the product that you need to deliver to clients, well, the product is the service, and getting to know what's important to them, and being, in your example, Saul, the quarterback for them and their full financial picture.
Yeah, I worked one of the folks I learned a lot from, who I used to work for, taught me the mantra customer obsessed, right? Like, as a financial advisor, you could be product obsessed, and you try to understand. But to your point, those are commodities. But if you're customer obsessed, and you're trying to create the best experience for your clients, sometimes they'll feel that that's much more differentiating than some of the products where they have 2 or 3 offers for the same thing on the table, and you're just competing on price.
Well, this last question here, I think, is trying to get to the root of, why aren't we all delivering this documented plan to clients? So they ask, Saul, you mentioned a third of advisors have a documented plan. Why do you think this is, and what will lead to changing that?
Yeah, so the reason I think it is because I do think we get caught up in the day-to-day, and many advisors aren't really focused on the plan will lead to deeper relationships. It's not instantaneous. It's not instant gratification that we're used to. Like my son, it's not like my son like watching YouTube and flipping from one video to another and now watching commercials. Like when I grew up, we used to have to wait till the next week to watch the next show. So maybe I'm used to a little more delayed gratification. But I think that's the reason, right? Planning doesn't deliver the results in an hour or in a day, right? It delivers better results over time. Right. And you have to go in expecting that and knowing that. And once you see that, the belief is built and our best advisors never turn back, it becomes the core of how they run their practice. But not everybody starts that way. It's the reality.
Yeah, and so having the patience to seeing the long term, just like you're asking clients to plan over the long term, having that same approach for advisors within their own practice.
Yes.
Great. Well, one last question for you, Saul, before we wrap up our conference here. And this is based on, knowing we have a large population of students on today. They're either in graduate school or approaching the end of undergrad. Certainly it's finals time. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, so I'll end where I started. Like you asked, I think the first question you asked me is, what I learned in the last year on the job, and that's what you learn is the biggest learning is you're always learning. You have to proactively do that, particularly when you're starting out in your career. You'll have different jobs or different parts of a practice that you're going to be working in every couple of years. So that you could eventually see the whole thing, because it takes time to become that expert that we're saying about. So have the patience and do it. And if you ever feel you're not learning, then it's time to move on to the next thing.
I think that's great advice. So don't always be learning, number one, but two, don't let yourself get stagnant. And if you feel that way in a role, that's okay. It just means it's time to grow and see what's next for you in your professional development. Great. Well, thank you, Saul, so much for joining us for this conference. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and get to learn from you, and really appreciate you hopping on with us.
Thank you. Thank you all. It was great to be here, and enjoy. I guess everyone's breaking now. So enjoy the rest of the day or drinks after the conference or whatever people are doing.
Yeah, hopefully there's beautiful weather in St. Louis. And I'll end us, really where Rich started us with the conference. And that's a big thank you. Thank you to all of our presenters. Again, like you saw, the positive feedback has already started flowing in on both the quality and the content, which is no surprise given the rock star lineup of people we have able to join us. We've covered relevant and timely topics over the last day and a half throughout 12 different sessions. We've seen a huge amount of engagement on our social media channels as well. We've been asked a few times, so I wanted to share here that we will be making sessions available for replay after the event, so please check out our conference main page. Thank you to our partners, DFA, Edward Jones, and the CFA Society. Of course, without each of you, the conference and the networking receptions would not have been possible. And thank you to the planning team. So there are groups of folks behind the scenes at WashU, Edward Jones, DFA, that have been working seamlessly to make all of this possible. But most of all, thank you to all of our attendees. So we had over 600 registrants for this event. We appreciate you investing the time to learn and look forward to hosting you for future iterations of this conference. So next week, you'll each receive a follow-up email with a survey. Please take a few moments to complete that so we can continue to deliver what's most important to all of you. So that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.